We often think about the world as this constant tug of war, right? It's individuals versus society, free will versus the system. But what if we're completely missing the most powerful player on the field? What if there's this hidden force that's shaping everything, from who we are to how our world works? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on it. And this idea right here is the key that unlocks everything. It suggests that change isn't really something that happens inside of us. Instead, it's a reaction, an adaptation to the world around us. It's a bit of a puzzle, and honestly, as we start to unpack it, you might just find you see history itself in a totally new light. Exactly. It's not just this two-way street between you and your community. The real engine of change is that hidden third player, context. Think of it as the invisible architecture that structures our choices, our societies, and even our future. So what on earth is it?
Okay, to really get our heads around context, we have to start with a really, really big idea. One that governs everything from galaxies down to our daily lives. I know, it sounds huge, but trust me, this is where the whole story really begins.
So the universe kind of has a default setting, and it's called entropy. It's just this natural, unstoppable tendency for everything to go from order to, well, disorder. Like a hot cup of coffee that eventually cools down to room temperature? That's entropy. If you just let it run its course, the entire universe would eventually just settle. It would become this perfectly uniform, static place where nothing ever happens. No change, no life, really just nothing.
So that leads to the really big question, doesn't it? If the universe is supposed to be this featureless, static soup, why isn't it? Why is there stuff? Why are there planets and life and you sitting there watching this? What force is actually pushing back against that inevitable slide into cosmic boredom?
And here is the hero of our story, and it's a surprising one: constraints. Yeah, it sounds totally backward, but limits are what create everything. Think about a river, right? Without its banks to hold it in, the water would just spread out into a useless, shallow puddle. But the banks, the constraints, they channel the water, they give it power, and they give it direction. And in the very same way, all these cosmic and biological rules and limits, they channel energy to create complexity, to create structure, to create, well, us.
So here's the absolute critical point. Context is that active field of constraints. It is not just the passive background scenery of our lives. No, it's this dynamic, living web of rules and limits and conditions that is actively shaping what is and isn't possible. You change the constraints, you change the context, and when you change the context, you change the world.
So how does this big idea actually apply to us? Well, for all of human history, the single most important constraint has always been energy. You can literally map our entire story through a series of massive shifts in how we get it and how we use it.
And it really breaks down into 4 huge cycles. First, as hunter-gatherers, we were just passively taking whatever nature gave us. Then came agriculture, and for the first time we were actively harnessing the sun by planting crops. Third, with fossil fuels, we weirdly went back to a passive use, just digging up ancient stored solar energy. And now, today, we are just entering the 4th cycle, the active use of renewable energy. And every single one of these shifts meant completely rewriting the rules for civilization.
All right, let's make this real. Let's take a look at a massive turning point, the Enlightenment. We usually think of it as this revolution of brilliant ideas from brilliant thinkers, and it was. But what if those ideas could only ever take root because the underlying energy context was already changing? Look at the new constraints that were popping up. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia sets up the whole idea of sovereign states. That's a new political rule. Then, in 1709, a new way of smelting iron with coke breaks our total dependence on forests. That's a new material constraint. And then the big one, James Watt's steam engine. It didn't just create a new energy constraint, it completely shattered an old one.
75%. Let that sink in. Watt's engine used 75% less fuel than the engines that came before it. This wasn't just a tiny improvement. This was an absolute game changer. It fundamentally flipped the entire energy equation, making powerful, transportable energy cheap and abundant for the very first time in human history.
And the result of that was this incredible shift. Before, society was literally tied to the land. Your life was dictated by the seasons and by your local geography. But with cheap energy that you could move anywhere, everything changed. Suddenly, factories could be built anywhere.
Cities exploded in size. Wealth wasn't just about owning farmland anymore, it was about controlling the engines of industry. The entire context for being a human was rewritten from the ground up.
So why does any of this history matter right now? Because we are living through another one of these great shifts. We're in the middle of moving from that third energy era, fossil fuels, into the fourth one, renewables. And the rules of the global game are being totally rewritten as we speak.
See, this transition to renewables, it's not just about climate change. That's a huge part of it for sure, but it's also a fundamental change in our geopolitical context. Energy is becoming local again. The stuff you need for batteries and solar panels, that's the new oil, the new strategic resource. The entire global power structure that was built on oil and gas for the last 2 centuries is being reconfigured right before our eyes.
And you can actually see the world's major powers adapting to this new context in real time, each playing by their own internal rules. You've got Europe, which is leaning into integration and regulations, trying to lead the charge on renewables. Then you see the US, which is really emphasizing its sovereignty, aiming for energy independence, partly through fossil fuels, but also developing renewables. And then there's China, pushing for self-reliance by trying to achieve global dominance in all the clean tech supply chains. These aren't just random policies, they're strategic adaptations to a new reality.
So, what is the big takeaway from all this? Well, understanding context is actually incredibly empowering. It helps you see the invisible forces that are shaping our world, and more importantly, your place within it all.
So here are 3 things to really hold on to. First, who you are isn't some fixed thing. It is constantly being shaped by the context you find yourself in. Second, those huge historical changes, they almost never have one simple cause. They bubble up from this complex web of shifting constraints. And finally, remember that the present is always path-dependent. The context of yesterday built our world, and the context we have today is building the world of tomorrow.
Looking back, it's pretty easy to see how a new kind of engine or a peace treaty completely changed the world. But that leaves us with one last, really important question. What are the constraints we're creating today with our technology, our laws, our values that will define the context for all the generations that come after us? What world are we building right now?